This video is sponsored by Enviro Games. What if your next war game could help the planet and not harm it? Well, join me as I take a look at Novus Malum, a game from Enviro Games, and see how eco-friendly it actually is. And bar that, if that doesn't float your boat, watch me as I paint through some models and talk through the test model process. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. So Peachy, why are you talking to me about a company that makes eco-friendly products and stuff like that for wargaming? What is this about? Well, I love the environment, I love the planet, and I want to keep the planet going, but I also love painting miniatures and I love plastic toys. So can you get the best of both worlds? So that's the big question really, isn't it? I mean, it is important, the environment. I love the environment, I love the planet. We all have a carbon footprint, regardless of how much we try and reduce it. But I met Dan and Jack from Enviro Games at the UK Games Expo. We got chatting and with the game Novus Malum that's currently out now actually, so you can check it out or buy it. Do buy it. It was really obvious that they cared a lot about making a product that's sustainable, bio-based, but trying not to compromise on the quality side of things. And that kind of got me interested. And I like to see companies like reaching out and doing this kind of thing. I mean, working for Workshop, yes, they're looking more on the greener side of things, but there's so much product that comes from China. There's all the shipping. And if they can't do it via shipping in cargo containers on ships, then they do air freight. And the carbon footprint is just through the roof. I mean, yes, there's cardboard-based products there that you can potentially recycle, but a lot of them are covered in like weird sort of plastics that are ink and oil-based kind of stuff. So actually, can you recycle a lot of that product? So I was always a bit, as someone who has a very full blue recycling bin, I'm very keen on companies that want to look at that side of it. And it is the future as well. I mean, you see on the news, like plastics is bad, this, that, and the other. Our hobby is predominantly plastic based. And it does, has a little concern in the back of my head, like, oh, but I like my plastics and I like my Lego and I like my toys. So we're talking to Dan and Jack, they agreed on that kind of side of things where, it is costly and the impact on the environment is huge. So they kind of changed their mindset on how they wanted to see this product develop and how they wanted to create the business. I mean, they have full-time jobs already as it is, but they'd like this to become their job down the line and making sustainable bio-based products, which I think is sweet and very, very cool. They talked about the 3 Ps, which is all new to me, which is people, planet, profit, taking those things into account and making sure that you are responsible for people, planet, and you've got to make product that makes profit as well, but keeping all that within like the UK at the moment. So everything's manufactured in the UK, so they're not shipping stuff from China, making tokens out of recycled MDF. So again, you're reducing the impact there. I think it's all smart stuff. I don't know if it's just me, but I really like the packaging for the box. I like that kind of naive brown cardboard box. It's got a nice little sticker on it, obviously it's recyclable printed stickers. But I really like that. It kind of gives me an old, I want to say Victorian kind of feel, especially when you open the box and you've got these little brown envelopes and you open them up and they feel like little parcels of their own right. I think the only thing it's missing, and this is just like me going back to like my smelting days of the 1800s, is when you'd go to the post office with your shilling or your doubloons, there'd be nice brown wrapped paper with like string bows and stuff like that. So I think it's just missing that to add to that extra vibe of the Victorian era. But there's a quality in that as well. I think nowadays when you see like wrapping paper or like packaging that's really bright and colourful, it looks a bit, I don't know, cheap, weirdly. When you see things in brown paper with like little bows made out of string, there feels like there's a newer quality. It's almost like we're going back to like, oh, that looks like quality. That's handmade. And this box feels like that. It feels like it's got that quality, that handmade feel to it. The models are made from Cyocast. So if you don't know what that is, it's like it's great for startup companies as well. It's a recyclable plastic. So when you open the envelopes, you'll see that all the models are clipped off the sprue because you can recycle that. Warlord is starting to get into that as well. So that's where I became aware of this sort of process. It's quite bendy, hard to clean up, I won't lie. So scraping the mold lines off is a nightmare. So using a file or like carving in with a knife is better, but they are quite bendy as well, which means they last a bit longer. You know, if you drop them, they're not going to break. And when we get to the painting later on, you'll see it's not really that much different from plastic anyway. So from a painting point of view, and also a cleanup, other than like, you know, like I said, like you can't really scrape the mold lines off and they are a little bit more defined than others. I tend to not care about that as much. If you're doing something for a display, granted, mold lines are a big thing, but if you're doing stuff for armors and you've got like 50, 60 figures on the tabletop, the odd mold line here and there isn't going to bother you. I'm sure it won't. It doesn't bother me. So I used to care a bit more about those things, less so these days. And it's obvious from talking to the guys that, you know, there is continuous improvement. It's a bit like me making videos. I'm constantly making tweaks, constantly improving it. And you can see that that's where their mindset's at. They want to like reduce the cost. They want to reduce like the impact. So I'm really excited to see where this will go. Now, from a setting point of view, Novus Malum, that is their game, their fantasy game. Some people would argue it's generic fantasy, Peachy. It's just like dwarves versus like some kind of goblins. Granted, yes. But then most fantasy tends to look quite generic. And before you kill me in the comments, if you were brand new to fantasy, you never heard of Tolkien, but you knew fantasy was about like, or it's about dwarves and dragons in it, and then you started like watching Lord of the Rings, to you that would be generic fantasy. The same with Game of Thrones. It's War of the Roses reskinned with the odd dragon thrown in and some undead. So most fantasy and sci-fi can be quite generic. But that doesn't bother me. I like generic fantasy. I've always been a fantasy fan, certainly sword and sorcery stuff. And I'm a big fan of dwarfs, and seeing dwarfs in a box kind of had me sold. I'm not a fan of goblins and greenskins. Louise knows this. We're not enemies about this. I love the look of them. I love the sort of background of them, the art and this, that, and even how other people paint them. I just don't enjoy painting myself. So some gnomes in this box, I was like, oh, greenskins, gnomes. But actually it says gnomes, not greenskins. And I'm like, oh, actually, could have some fun with these. So I'll see how the mood takes me when it comes to painting these gnomes with a K from the Narwood. Also with a K. I stole that from Goobertown because he also did a video on this, so worth checking that out as well, because he talks about the set, and it's a great little video. I'll link it up here as well. We love Brent from Goobertown. So yes, excited is the word. They've got their own setting, which was based off a D&D campaign that they did, and I love it when people do that. They get like a passion project and they turn it into a product. I love to see that journey. I mean, everything you need to know from a background point of view is in this book. It's not a huge book, but it's got everything you need to know in the book, including the story. But you've got your tropes, which is your dwarves who are fighting the gnomes. The gnomes are very sort of like, I guess this is the thing I quite like as well. It's almost industry versus nature. So although there's this overarching story about the Great Shroud and there's the Fallen Kingdom, and there's some evil lord, I like the idea that this northern kingdom of dwarfs know that they're probably going to be first in line to do with the fighting, but there's the nature element, which is the gnomes versus the industry of dwarfs, and it kind of is quite poetic in a weird way. So it's almost like they're fighting the good fight within and without of their game system, and I like that. Smart, very smart. I do like that. So talking of the dwarves of Anvil Keep and the gnomes of Gnarlwood, I'm going to jump into doing some painting. I'm going to do some test models. Now, I've not planned any of this ahead. This is all done as I go along the process of painting. Normally, I have an idea in my mind's eye, and that is what's happening here. I've got an idea in my mind's eye. Nothing's on paper yet. And the point of a test model, which is key to any kind of paint job, any kind of unit you're doing, is you apply colours to your model, and then you can see if those colours work. You can also work out, actually, if I was to do this again, I would spray this a different color, or I would apply these colors in this order instead of this order. So this is the great thing about doing test models, is you get to test, obviously, but also plan out for the rest of the units as well. So then it's not a long and laborious process. So I'm going to start with the gnome first, but both the gnome and the dwarf in this guide have been sprayed with brown. When I don't have an idea, when I'm doing a test model, I often go with like some neutral colors. So if I've got lots of brown leathers and woods on a model, I will spray them brown. If I've got lots of black leathers, like boots and belts that are black, or other kind of things, I'll either spray them gray or black. Gray if I want to shade down with contrasts and speed paints, or black if I want to dry brush up with lighter tones. They're usually the three colors I tend to start off with a test model, unless the model's like white, then I'll probably spray in white. But yeah, it's just something to bear in mind when you're doing your own test models, is like, don't worry about the undercoat to start off with. Just pick something that's neutral. Grey is probably your best bet, to be fair. But here there was like a very sort of earthy looking natural dude, which is the gnome, and something I wasn't sure about, which was the dwarf, who I was going to aim for like the Iron Hills dwarves, maybe the armor from that, which is why I kind of went down the brown route. But enough of that. Let's start with the gnome of Narwood. Let's see how I get on. So the first thing I'm going to do is get some leather brown. So this is a nice light brown. What I want to do here is just dry brush that over the brown details. This is going to pick out things like straps, boots, wood, any kind of leathery things. Also give me a bit of a pre-highlight for any kind of washes I might apply. So whether that's going to be like speed paints or whatever. So I'm just going to work my way around. Then just for a little bit of extra definition, what I'm going to do is get some amber skin, and I'm just going to lightly dry brush this. This is mostly going to be for those leather and wood details, not anything else, but it's very much slap chop orientated, but with browns instead of greys and blacks. Then I thought, you know what, since it's a test model, let's just try and apply some of that hardened leather all over. This will knock back some of those highlights where it's a bit too much. It's gonna be great for like leather. I was in two minds whether to do it on the wood, and then kind of in the end I decided, yep, you know what, and apply that on the wood as well. Then for a little bit of punch, I thought I'd add a little bit of red in there. It's very autumnal, and with those extra highlights punching through, I did thin it down slightly. I thought that could work quite nicely as well. Be a nice bit of a spot colour, because it's quite, well, browns, reds, oranges. That's the plan in my head. And I decided as well to pick out that bandana and those feathers as well. And with it being quite a natural sort of creature, I thought get some greens in there, because in autumn it's still green, you know, there's a bit, not a lot, but it's quite nice. So I thought I'd add that to the cloak or the cloth areas. It's a nice little touch there. Gives them a bit of a ranger vibe, I suppose. Again, with those pre-highlights or dry brushes, that's going to help add a little bit of extra highlight there as well. A little bit more punch to the colour. And if I lost some highlights here and there, I just went over with a little bit of amber skin, mainly just to bring some back. Speaking of the skin, I wasn't quite sure if to go flesh or like greys or blues and stuff like that. So I thought I'd go with a green. I quite like necrotic flesh. So I thought I'd start with that, and I can always like wash that down with like a colour, whether that's another green, maybe use that algae green again. So I thought I'd add it first and see how I feel. So just going around base coating that. In some places I had to do a couple of coats, like the hands and stuff, but there's only a couple of little details to pick out. I quite like the idea of dragon glass that you see in Game of Thrones, so I thought, you know what, I know it's like flint, but I'm going to go with dragon glass. That's what their weapons are going to be made of, or something along those lines. Obsidian. And then, yeah, my mind, I thought I'll try green instead of flesh tones, so I went with green on the skin. Add a bit of punch out. Don't normally do green skins, I'll tell you that now. But I like the effect, and it's the same colour I use for the cloak. As you can tell, with different base coats and different undercoats or whatever, you do get a different effect from it, which is quite interesting. I do like playing around with colour like that. Now, I like oranges with these autumnal colours. It just works. So I wanted to get a bit of that warmth in there. That was definitely going to go on the hair. This is just a speed paint, so I wasn't quite sure how that worked. I was quite happy with it, but I know that I'd probably do some extra dry brushing later on if needed. Of course, I forgot this little totem on his cloak, little bird skull. So I thought, well, I've used amber skin. Instead of randomly getting another bone colour, I'll just use that. Makes sense. And then after the speed paint's dry, I thought I'll just tidy some of the raised areas on the skin. So the usual sort of extremities, knuckles, nose, cheeks, ears, those kind of things. All the bits that stick out, basically. And often in a test model, I do tend to try some colours. I thought I'd get some army green, do some highlights. I wasn't massively taken with the army green here. It kind of works, and I kind of like it, but I feel like if I was doing a whole horde of these, that would be quite a lot of time invested. So I might just reserve that for characters and stuff. Like the rank and file, I'll probably just keep it to the dry brush. And again, in some places, I just felt it needed knocking back with some algae green, and in some of those deeper recesses as well. And talking of knocking back, again, those red trousers started to get a bit more fleshy red, so I thought I'd knock them back a bit. Again, you can see I'm not going on all the highlights, just in some of the deeper recesses of the folds. Same for the bandana. And then I thought I'd pick out the eyes with a little bit of black in the mouth. Again, just get some, I'm using Grim Black here, which is a speed paint. It's already pre-thinned, because that's what it does. It's a speed paint, it's thin. So just dropping that in the eyes. Again, just be mindful when you are doing this. And if you do splodge, you can always tidy back up. And after the green dried on the cloak, I thought I'd add a little bit more in the deeper recesses, much like I did with the red. It felt like the orange needed a bit more punch, so I started to dry brush the hair with a little bit of legendary red, which is kind of like Wild Rider red. It's kind of like an orangey red. I really like it. So the dry brushing was going all right, but then in places, like certainly the sideburns, I felt like it needed a little bit more of an edge highlight or tidy up. And then whilst I had it out, I thought I'd add a bit of orange to the feathers. I thought that'd be quite nice, give them a little bit of warmth as well. Just balance it out across the model. Again, I'm just playing around here. There is no sort of end goal. It's more like, does this work? Oh, maybe, we'll see. And I used some Castle Grey to do some highlights on that totem on his cloak. And he's got some straps on his spear as well. Also, it's really hard to see in the flesh at the time, but I did notice there's like that cool little tree design that they have on their chests, or you see in the book. So I gave that a little subtle dry brush to help pick that out a bit as well. Although it does look like a little stick man waving his arms out, which I quite like as well. And as I'll allude later on, I folded and decided I'm going to go all over with strong tone. This originally wasn't the plan. I was going to leave it as it was, but it just wasn't sitting well with me. So I decided I'm going to do some strong tone. I'm going to do it all over. And the end result I was much happier with. Again, the process of doing a test model. Sometimes you look at things and it just doesn't work. So there we are. Our Gnome of the Gnarlwood is done. I like it more now it's based for sure. I think I still need to go back to the drawing board maybe with some of the colours. Maybe I think the red needs a little bit more, I don't know, earthiness to it. Maybe it's a bit too bright. I don't know. Maybe it's not bright enough. Regardless, I'm not happy enough with it. It needs work. So I won't lie, I really struggled with the Gnome. Couple of reasons. They're quite smaller models than the dwarfs being small. And the details are quite slight. That's no sort of dig towards the sculpting or the models themselves. It's just, for me, as a personal preference, they were just a lot smaller. I like chunky things. I don't normally paint natural stuff as well. Look, I guess the nearest I've got to that is probably like Sylvaneth and whatever, and mostly branched. They don't have lots of leathers and straps on them. But I got these autumnal tones in mind, and I was trying to do it without any washes, and I don't normally do that. I normally use a wash after the base coats and then tidy it back up. And it's like a process I'm used to. It's like a comfort thing. Maybe that is my talent, is just the wash, as opposed to me actually being skilled at painting. Who knows? But I struggled a bit, and I'm still like now looking at the model going, am I happy with it? And I think there'll still be some tweaks down the line for this. But weirdly, as soon as I applied that wash, I kind of caved and I went, all right, I'll do a wash. And I applied that wash and it looked much better and it helped tie all the colours together. So I think sometimes it is just an effect. This is kind of out of sequence a bit. I'd stopped and put the Gnome to the side, and I decided to jump onto the dwarf and start painting the dwarf. And then once I did the wash all over the dwarf, I was like, you know what? He's stood there staring at that dwarf going, why do you get washed and I don't? So I was like, all right, Gnome boy, I'm going to give you a wash. So I gave him a wash and he was like, thanks, I look much better now, Peach. I was like, yeah, you do. You know what, Gnome boy, you do. You look much better. So that was interesting. And I think there's some other colours. I think because I've gone down those autumnal tones, but I wanted that skin to be a bit more poppy. Not as in the colour poppy, but pop out a bit more. I think once it's based, then it will look better. And at the time of me recording, it wasn't based. So at the time of you seeing this, you'll see it based, and I'll probably be like, yeah, actually, it looks better now it's based because it's got a setting. Because when you got, and this is a thing as well, you'll get, and I want to throw that into there, when you are doing your test models, usually if you do an all over undercoat, let's say you're doing like Blood Angels and you spray them red, or you do like, I don't know, Stormcast and you spray them gold or whatever, the base remains that colour and it throws everything off. But once you like, and I kind of didn't do this here and I should have done, once you like just change the colour of the base, so let's say you spray your models gold, you're doing a Stormcast and it's got a gold base, it kind of throws it out. Paint the base black, or if you've got a Blood Angel, paint the base black. And what that does is it then just focuses on the model that you've painted, as opposed to that base interrupting with it. So that's something I should have done here and I didn't do. But I know down the line I'll make little tweaks here and there, but I quite like the red hair and the little flashes of red clothing. So I've waffled on enough about gnomes and why I failed on the gnome painting guide. So I'm going to move on to the dwarfs. I've painted enough dwarfs in my life. I love dwarfs. They are my favorites. I mean, I love mountains. I love the idea of living in a mountain. I love steel armor and hammers and beards, although I don't have a big beard. I'm a bit of a youngling. Yeah, I love it all. I just love dwarfs. They're great. So yeah, I'm going to paint a dwarf. I'm going to be safe. I've got an idea in mind. Golds, blues, silvers. So we'll see how we crack on. So I began the dwarf with a subtle dry brush of true brass. Thought, yeah, I'll go for the Grimhammer kind of vibe that you see in The Hobbit. And then I didn't like it. So I went all over and went heavier. proper heavy sort of overbrush. Still got some of that brown in the recesses, so it kind of gives it a bit of a darker kind of vibe. Then I went around picking out any leather bits, so leather straps, boots, gloves, anything really that felt like it should be leather. With it being like silver as well, being dry brushed over the top of that brown, it might need a coat or two, but mostly with leather brown, it's got decent coverage. Again, as I'm planning this out, I decided to save me some time. I could do some of the wrists as flesh, but I thought, no, just do it as one big long glove. It's got some straps there. Do it as a big long glove. The edge of the glove is hidden by the straps. Saves time later on down the line. Now, I knew I wanted some blue. Wasn't entirely sure which tone of blue, so I picked out one, abyssal blue, put it on, immediately fell in love with it. So I was like, yep, you know what? I'm going to go with this blue. I like it. Normally, I try and change the effect if I use the same colour across like different textures. So if I'm going to do this on the shield, I will probably do like a wash, maybe tied up in places, but I definitely want a different effect with the blues, and that might come into the highlighting stage. But yeah, just went my way around. So yeah, I was just picking out the blue on the cloth and also that little banding that goes around the chainmail as well. And then it was on to the shield. Now I was doing my reverse highlighting technique here because I like doing it, makes things look battered. So I start applying the blue, but don't go all to the edges because I can always treat that as chipping, and it saves me doing edge highlights because it's a different finish. This is what I was talking about, the blue having different finishes. Having that metallic underneath showing through will make it look like a different texture. And then any tidying up needed, so I've got a bit of blue on the shoulder and anywhere else, or if you need to do some chipping and stuff, but mostly for those little rivets on that little banding that goes around the base of the chainmail, the studs. It was looking very cold and drab, so I thought I'd get some very nice warm blingy gold in there. Greedy gold's a nice gold, so that added a little bit of extra warmth and some nice focal points as well, because you've got some nice little details here and there. So initially it was just the belt buckle, that little emblem on the chest. Then I thought, oh yep, the visor on the helm, that looks quite cool. It's got a very Saxon kind of vibe, Viking kind of vibe. I know they like having gold around that. And I decided to start doing the trim around the sleeves of the top, and then of course around the arm as well. So that's sometimes what I do, is initially have an idea, I start placing the colours on, then I can add more as time goes on because it looks right or it feels right. You can always paint over it if you don't like it. For the flesh, it was a bit of a toss-up between barbarian flesh and ruddy flesh. I like my dwarfs looking a bit more ruddy, so I went with ruddy umber. Nice little colour there as well, and I can use that barbarian flesh as a highlight down the line. So once I've done my shades and stuff, but I was a bit worried it might clash with the leather brown, but I think after some shades it won't. To represent my love of red-haired people and gingers, I used the same colour used on the gnome for his beard. And then, of course, the classic swamp your model in strong tone. I do like doing this. It is my secret weapon. It is talent in a bottle, but it also does a lot of legwork from an army painter's point of view, and also just getting some colours blocked in and getting some shades done. You can always blackline things later on if you want to, but I prefer to, you know, just, yeah, apply it all over quite heavily. Just be mindful of pooling around the feet and stuff. So inevitably, when you do a matte shade all over, it's going to knock back your metallics. So one of the things I like to do is get some of that metallic paint again. It's kind of a tidy up stage, but I'm only picking out where the light's going to touch it mostly, or the raised areas. So whether that's like pauldrons, tassets, breastplates, helmets, whatever, just picking here and there, and I can always highlight it after with like a lighter silver or something. But yeah, just go through the motions, go check out the things that you think need doing. You can also use this as an opportunity to do a little bit of chipping on the shield as well, or just like punch out some of those edges so like fresher bits of damage. And of course, if those studs need a little bit more love or a little bit more bling, you can just go around with a slightly smaller brush and do that as well. And then with the gold, I did the exact same thing I did with the true brass, just going around picking out the odd bit here and there. Now, the great thing about doing an all-over shade is it darkens down a colour. So like with the leather here, for instance, I can then get that leather again, and I can then use that as like another sort of tone, because it's a bit lighter now. So I can tidy that up. That's part of the tidy up stage, really. So it's almost like your first highlight as well. So just go around, pick out some bits, some straps. Same with the blue. Very much like it's going to be a little bit lighter when you apply it a second time over that washed version of the blue. Just adds a bit more punch to it as well, but still keeping that dark, dingier stuff in the recesses. Also, I don't always do this, but I like to add like a bit more to like shield and like the damaged bits of metals and stuff like that. I just think it gives it a nice finish. So some places it's still bright, others it looks a bit grimy, maybe weathered. And then any black details, I decided I was going to do the weapon haft with black here. Just stands out quite nicely. You could do like metallics, I suppose, but I quite like black. It's nice, strong, really stands out. Of course, drop some in for the eye holes as well. Make a mistake, wipe with your finger. Now, sometimes I don't always do this, but in places where I think it needs a bit more of a divide, say if there's like gold and flesh, they can be quite subtle. and the wash doesn't always do it for you, I like to thin down or use like a wash version or a speed paint version of a black or whatever, and just black line, just go around, pick out the odd bit here and there where it just needs a bit more love. Then for the skin, I just got some Barbarian Flesh because it was a toss-up between Ruddy, Unburnt, Barbarian Flesh, so I decided to use both. Barbarian Flesh as the highlight, just working my way around, picking out some of those raised areas. Don't have to worry about the face, just a big beard and a helmet. So love that for these guys. And of course, highlight the beard as well, using that legendary orange. So just the odd little bit here and there. Could dry brush it if you want to. And then if you feel it needs it, just go around some of the golds and silvers and then just pick out just the edges with a little bit of like a lighter silver. Here I'm using Mithril. I mean, Mithril fits with dwarfs, certainly if it's Tolkien ones. But these aren't Tolkien ones, so I don't know if they use Mithril. I mean, sometimes it's hard with metallics to get like a bit of a lighter tone to stand out, but usually that's why I tend to go for the lightest silver and tend to use like shades and like darker silvers for the initial colours, because then you get a bit more of you get more definition between the two. It's more contrast. But yeah, just using the edge of your brush, working your way around the helmet. You can always like pick up some raised bits as well. So it's, as opposed to an edge highlight, it's just like layering some of the areas. Just adding some extra chips and scratches because he's a dwarf. He likes to fight. He likes to bash things. Those poor gnomes. And I thought I'd use the amber skin for the leather work, like pretty much I did with the gnome, using that for as a dry brush for the leather. I'm just going to do like some, well, my jaggedy highlights here and there for scratched up leather work. Some places I'll probably just, you know, do an edge highlight here and there, but I do like my scratchy leather, me worn old leather. It looks nice. You know, just work your way around, take your time, enjoy this bit. You know, again, this is a test model. I always find I go a bit far with a test model and maybe cut some corners or reduce the amount of effort when it comes to the rank and file. Felt like the blue needed a little bit more love, so I got something called Tidal Blue. I just used that to pick out some of the edges here and there, mostly for the cloth. I didn't use this for the shield because I wanted that blue to feel different to the cloth. That's what I was talking about earlier, about making the texture seem different, so the shield doesn't get the highlight, the cloth does. The Dwarf of Anvil Keep is finished. I'm a big fan of dwarfs. I've mentioned this multiple times, and I do like blue and gold. Maybe I could have gone darker with the blue, but I like the end result. Don't normally do leather this light as well, and it's not off-putting. I quite like it. Even with that light base, it works. So yeah, pleased with this guy. Well, the dwarf is done. I knew I'd be safe with the dwarf. I do love dwarfs, and keeping to that simple scheme of like silver, gold, and blue in my head, I knew would work. And I really like the scheme. I do love the interlocking shields. Now, this is something I didn't probably observe enough, actually. So the shield design that they have, you'll notice it kind of like that part of the anvil flares out to one side, but there's like a void on the other. That's so that other flary bit of anvil can interlock. I'll get a little shot done and just lay some shields out so you can see it. You won't ever do that in game, but that's well thought of. I do really like that. That is a smart move. Well done, guys. Well done. I do like that. I like practical thinking like that. But yeah, I wanted to add some stuff to the dwarfs as well. I wanted to do some like markings. I want to add some yellow in there, like whether do like chevrons or do some checks or some form of heraldry. And I was like pondering it. I kept looking at the armor because anyone that knows me knows I really like the game Raid. And Raid has like some really nice design and paint work on some of the armor suits and stuff like that. So if you download, it's a freeable download thing. But if you look at the index, you can see all the characters, and I like looking at that as ideas for like how to paint up armor and stuff. And I was like, oh, I'll have a look at that. And there's some blue armors with some yellow designs. So what I could have done was maybe added more blue to the armor, so then I could add in like some more yellow designs and stuff. But I was then worried that it'd get a bit cluttered and a bit complicated. So I thought, you know what? I might save that for characters or further down the line. But I was pleased enough. I keep looking down at the models. If you're wondering, I was like looking at the dwarf with loving eyes. But that brown spray worked, I think. In hindsight, if I was to do it again, I'll probably, and this is the thing with the test model stage, from a speed point of view, it makes sense to spray them silver. Whether you do it through airbrushes, which is probably more environmentally friendly, or rattle cans if that's all you've got, like me. Silver would be better. Then you can wash down, dry brush up, and then pick out all those other colours. And it's the same for the gnome as well. I probably would keep that with brown and then dry brush those colours up. So that's the thing with the test models is working out that initial slap on the colour process and then kind of figuring your brain what comes next. So taking the dwarf, for example, I know by spraying it silver, washing it, and then dry brushing the entirety of the silver, would make sense. But actually from doing the painting process, well, actually there will be some gold in there, which would need a dry brush of silver. So maybe after I've sprayed it silver, I will put some gold details on, wash them all together, and then dry brush them all together. And then I can pick out the leathers, then I can pick out the blues. But there'll be places where I'd have to tidy back up with silvers or golds here and there because of like textures being slightly higher or whatever. So that is part of the process. And hopefully, you know, you will get some insights from this, some maybe shortcuts that you'd be like, oh, never thought about using sprays in that way. Or yes, I'd often do this, but never thought about changing the process and adding the gold before doing the silver. So really, I mean, from a test model point of view, that's the basic process I go through. Is I initially have some color undercoat. I apply some color to the models. I see what colors balance well, whether that's like a temperature thing, you know, warm colors versus cold colors, a contrast thing. So, you know, does this color contrast with that? Obviously using the color wheel to help there. And then after that, I then work out the steps in how I order that as well, because sometimes that adds the efficiency in there and speeds up the painting so you can get more stuff done quicker and there's less going back and forth and less tidying up. But yeah, I like painting the dwarf. I like painting the gnome. Failed at the gnome a bit, but you know what? That comes with the territory. Sometimes you do a paint job, you're not so keen on it, and there's just one thing that needs changing. And I know somewhere on there, I think maybe the red will need punching out a bit more. Maybe I need to do some more highlights on the red, and that'll add a little bit of liveliness to it. That's all part of the process. So a bit of a review, I reckon, of the product. So I want to make it clear that though this video has been sponsored by Dan and Jack Enviro Games, I don't just take sponsors willy-nilly. I take sponsors that I'm invested in and I care about, and I care about the environment, and I really like the idea of where their mindset is with making products that take that into account. So I want to spread the word, really, and see how, you know, I want people to buy their products and make their business great so they can carry on making cooler products, which are more environmentally friendly, and then just push the word out so more people will take on board that kind of stuff. So that's why I'm like, yes, I will happily do this. And the game itself is great. So I've had a read through it. It's a really fun little mechanic from the priority point of view, where you pull out, depending on how many units you got, you pull out like your little tokens to work, and then you work out, you know, this one's got 1, this one's got 2, this one's got 3. So that's the order they activate. So you don't know that until you pull them out. Little things like that, little game mechanics that are either new or I've not experienced myself. Other people may have experienced that in different games. It's irrelevant. For me, it's new and I like it. And it's cool. It's skirmish based stuff. It kind of reminds me a little bit, although it's like units. I've got the feels of the very first Fellowship of the Ring box set that came out. And when I was flicking through the book, it felt like that. I had that kind of like nostalgic hit. I know it's a very different game system. It's a very different IP. I mean, it's dwarfs and goblin-esque things in it, but it had that feel of that game. Yeah, I had fond memories of when I was younger getting into Fellowship of the Ring. So thank you for that alone. But I mean, I like the presentation of the box set. I love the cardboard box where I talked about the Victorian vibe. I know it's a silly thing to observe, but I do like it. I like brown packaging. Maybe I'm just really dull. I don't know, but I love brown packaging. It has a quaintness to it, although it's quite naive, I guess, and basic as a word that I hate to use, but it's true. It's great and feels, I don't know, it felt like Christmas opening the packets up. I like blind bags. I'm like, oh, what's in here? So from an improvements point of view, love the book. I love how it feels in hand. It's really nicely presented. Allude a little bit more. I mean, it's mentioned in the background about these different races and stuff, and you've got a map, but it'll be nice to allude to some of the other factions that may be coming down the line, because I know they have the idea of like releasing more stuff, because not everyone's into dwarves and gnomes, but they might be into like humans that have a different vibe to the Empire or people of Westeros or whatever, you know, whatever kind of cultural vibe you give it. Maybe there's some elves in there. Maybe there's, you know, all sorts of weird and wacky creatures and races. So some alluding to some of that would be quite good in the text. And then people that would be like, well, you know what, I'll paint the dwarfs and the gnomes up, but I'm really digging the sound of these guys. And I'm like that. If I get like a new box set that comes out and I see the two forces, the starter forces, they're quite cool. I like them. I'm not massively zazzed about the orcs, but I quite like these humans. Oh, there's some dwarfs coming down the line. Ooh, Okay, tell me more. Tell me more about these dwarfs. I like my little beardy boys. But yeah, something like that would be quite nice without revealing too much, just for those that might not be into dwarfs and gnomes. That would be quite a good thing. My biggest bugbear with the entire thing, and I spoke to Jack and Dan about this anyway, was there's a couple of scenarios in the back, get you started scenarios, really cool. And there's two that require some objectives. So you've got like some crates to collect on one of them. And there's like some horses to round up on another. You get these cool wooden tokens. Mega, they all have like different sort of uses in the game, but there's no tokens for objectives, whether that's horses or crates or some generic token to represent them. If you're, and this is the thing I was trying to remember from my days at workshop, you aim a box set for, it could be someone's very first box set or very first game. So having that in mind, people might not have horses or crates or tokens to represent that. Granted, yes, you can get some paper and you can cut it out and you can draw a little picture of a horse, but you want to reduce the amount of effort for someone from an entry level point of view. So having those tokens already made, whether it's just 3 tokens that are generic, like objective tokens, or ones that have like horse pictures on and some that have crate pictures, I think will be quite a cool thing to do. So that'll be my feedback, I guess, for the product, is allude to some of the other factions that are coming out. And if you've got like objective tokens on a game, stick them in the box. But yeah, really like it, loving it. Enjoyed painting the models. I've not done much with Psycast in my life, so it was interesting to paint those. And I didn't find it weird or a chore, and the paint went on really well. So I was really chuffed with that. So seeing more stuff done through Psycast will be interesting. And they're quite bendy. And there was a couple of times where I did drop the model. It's got weird shaky hands that drop things from time to time. And the model didn't smash. So I was well chuffed with that. So that's a big win for me. But yeah, I enjoyed looking at this. I enjoyed reviewing it. I enjoyed painting the models up for it. I'm interested to see where it goes. I think the whole concept of take into account the environment and the impact you have on the environment is something that a lot of other games companies should look into as well. So it'll be good to see Enviro Games taking the lead on this, and others to follow, I think. But as always, thank you for watching this video. I hope you got something out of it, whether that's like, this sounds cool, I'm in, I love the environment and I love gnomes, or I love dwarfs, or you just like test models. I never thought about that process, Peachy. Mega, thank you for showing us that. You're welcome. You're absolutely welcome. And of course, I can't leave a video without thanking these beautiful people, as well as all my patrons. Your support is great. I love you all. Thank you so much, as always, for your support, including you folks on the YouTubes watching. Thank you for watching, and thank you for subscribing. Without you, I couldn't do these videos and waffle on at the end about thanking people. I like to thank people, though. I think it's polite to thank people. It's like having a hard day at work and your staff's done really good and you thank them. I think that's the right thing to do. No one does that to me anymore. I don't get thank you for my hard work anymore because I don't have a manager. I'm the manager. Maybe I should thank myself. Thank you, Peach, for working really hard and getting this video edited at like late at night and early in the morning. Thank you. You're welcome. I enjoyed it. It was great. I got to talk about dwarfs and gnomes, and I had a great time. Well, I'm glad you had a great time, Peachy. Starting to go into the realms of Smeagol and Gollum right now.